Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this mini lesson, Steven's going to be teaching you a beautiful chord progression, which I think brings two things to the table. The first is the progression itself. This is probably a progression that you haven't played yet, and it's quite a bit more complex than our typical 1, 5, 6, 4 pop chord progression that we usually gravitate towards. So you're going to get to learn something new and fresh to the ear sounding. Now the second thing that I think is really fun about this progression is that it uses both finger picking and strumming. So you get to work on the best of both playing styles in this lesson. So let's go ahead and take a step back and let's talk a little bit about the lesson. So in this video, Steven's going to be teaching you how to play the entire piece. But if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site, rockclass101.com, do a search for ML019. That's the lesson number for this lesson. Don't forget too, on that page is the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, you can watch the tab scroll across in real time, you can highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you wish. Just a great asset in learning this tune that much easier. Alright guys, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Steven to teach you how to play this, and then I will catch you at the end of the video.
Hi everyone, and welcome to mini lesson number 19, also known as a beautiful chord progression. And I think that's a really appropriate title for this piece because Andrew has put together a really beautiful chord progression here. And not only are you going to learn a really pretty piece of music in its own right, but there are a number of concepts and techniques that we're going to learn along the way too. This piece will give you the opportunity to practice chord inversions higher up the neck. It'll work on your finger picking as well as your strumming. It's also a great piece to work on your sense of rhythm and timing, and we'll be looking at dynamics as well. So there really is a lot going on in this mini lesson. So make sure you've got your high G ukulele and let's get straight into it. This piece is in 6/8 time, so we have 6 eighth notes per measure, which will count in 2 groups of 3 with a slight emphasis on beats 1 and 4. So that should sound something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's going to give us that lovely kind of swaying waltz-like feel. For theme 1, the rhythm is nice and simple. We're just playing this continuous 8th note rhythm, so we just play on the beat throughout. That's going to allow us to concentrate on learning this beautiful chord progression, which we'll then just repeat in theme 2 and theme 3, but we'll also be adding some strumming and slightly more complex rhythms in those sections, but we'll worry about all that later on. So for now, back to the start of the A section. Measures 1 and 2 should sound like this. Okay, so you can see there the little dynamic symbol MP standing for mezzo piano, meaning that we're playing this whole theme 1 section moderately soft, so fairly quiet for this section. So if we look at measure 1, we're starting on this version of a G chord where we are barring the A string and the E string with the first finger, so kind of flatten that finger across those 2 strings so we're fretting both of them, and then the second finger will take that C string at the 11th fret, and then the G string is just open. We play all 4 strings together on beat 1. And how you play those 4 strings is entirely up to you. You could just strum through that chord, you could just pick them all simultaneously, or you could do a kind of like classical style arpeggio strum, or arpeggio pick through those strings. Whatever you prefer, whatever you think sounds good there, it's all good. So that's beat 1, we play that kind of full chord there, and then for the rest of this measure we're just picking the notes of this chord and we're just playing on the beat like I've said. In terms of the right hand, I would probably go for a kind of standard Pima picking style here where we have the thumb on the G string, the index on the C, middle finger on the E string, and then the ring finger on the A string. So beat 2, after we've done that chord strum, we just pick the C string, then we pick the E string, then we pick the A string, and then just work back down to the E string, and then the C string. Okay, and that picking pattern is kind of standard through most of theme 1, in fact all of theme 1 apart from the final measure, measure 8. So that picking pattern of a full chord strum, C, E, A, E, C. As I say, we're doing that for every measure. So if we take that into measure 2, all we're going to do now is kind of really move the E string up 1 fret at a time as we move through this theme. So for this measure, we want the E string to move up from the 10th to the 11th fret. So what we'll do, we'll add the 3rd finger onto that E string at the 11th, but then we'll take the 1st finger off this bar and then move it just onto the A string, so it's just holding the A string at the 10th. So a bit of a squeeze to get all the fingers on there, but they should fit. So beat 1 is, like before, all 4 strings together. And then we just repeat the same picking pattern as the previous measure of C string, E string, A string, E string, and then C string. Okay, so those 2 measures through once again. Okay, nice. So let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. On to measures 3 and 4, they should sound like this. Okay, so you can see there, same picking pattern as before, and we're just moving this E string up 1 fret at a time. So at the end of measure 2, we were playing this G augmented chord. In order to turn it into this G6 chord for the start of measure 3, all we're going to do is move that 3rd finger up 1 fret. So it's on the 12th fret now. The other 2 fingers just stay where they are. And then we play, like before, all 4 strings on beat 1. And then C string, E string, A string, E string, C string. Okay, and then into measure 4, exactly the same picking pattern again, but we're just moving this E string up 1 more fret to the 13th fret. So the pinky now will take that. So the 3rd finger comes off as we put the pinky onto the E string 13th. Again, the 1st and 2nd fingers just stay where they are, and we play that same picking pattern again, but now on this G7 chord. Okay, so there's 2 measures once again. Brill. So let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. Then on to measures 5 and 6, they should sound like this. Okay, so measure 5, we've come to the C chord now, or version of a C chord at the 7th fret here. So from the G7 chord where we were, at the end of measure 4, we're going to have to do a bit of a change here quite quickly to get these fingers in position. There's no kind of real trick to this, just kind of practicing getting those fingers in position. And that could just be a bit of kind of finger push-ups there, just practicing that change back and forth. If you struggle with it, if you're fine with it, don't bother obviously, but if you do find that change hard, to get it smooth and quick into that position, maybe just practice that. Just changing between them to get it nice and quick. So when we hit measure 5, we're on this C chord here, and same picking pattern as before, play all 4 strings, and then pick the notes just like before: C string, E string, A string, E string, C string. Okay. And then into measure 6, we want to turn this into a C minor chord. So the way we'll do this is we'll keep that 3rd finger on the E string at the 8th, and then we'll basically kind of swap these 2 fingers so that they're on the kind of each other's string. So the 1st finger is going to come over to the A string, and the second finger is going to come over to the C string, we want the first finger on A string 6th and the second finger on C string 7th to turn it into this C minor chord. I really like that change there, the C major into the C minor. It sounds really cool. So again, that is just a kind of practicing that change to get it nice and quick and get it nice and smooth. Keeping the third finger planted on that E string, it does help because it kind of anchors your hand in position, and then you just kind of hop those two fingers across to the opposite strings. Okay, and think about the timing of that as well, because when we play the end of measure 5, we play this C string at the 7th, and we want to hear that and to ring for long enough to sort of register that note, but then we want to do this quick finger swap quite quickly to get it ready for the C minor at the start of measure 6. So if I kind of show you that quite slowly from measure 5. You can see we play that note here, let it ring for long enough, and then quickly do a switch there. So that chord change again has to be quite quick to allow that last note of measure 5 to ring for long enough to register it, but then to get it in position ready for the start of measure 6. So we get a bit of practice there, just flipping those fingers over to make sure that's nice and quick and nice and smooth. Okay, so once we've hit beat 1 of measure 6, this C minor chord, just the same picking pattern as before to complete that measure. So measures 5 and 6. Nice. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. On to measure 7 and 8, they should sound like this. Okay, so measure 7 is this G chord of A string 5th, E string 7th, C string 7th with the open G. In order to get into that shape, we're moving from this C minor chord, which isn't far away. It's quite an easy change, this one. So for this change from this C minor, we'll keep that second finger on the C string at the 7th, and then these two fingers, the first finger and the third finger, will both just kind of slide down one fret. Okay, I find when I'm doing that, a slight sort of tilt at the elbow outwards and move the wrist round allows that second finger to stay planted and allows these two fingers to kind of just slide down one fret. So a little bit of wrist and elbow movement there will help get that in position. So once you're in that G chord position, same picking pattern as before, all 4 strings on beat 1. And then just pick those strings as we've been doing in every other measure so far. And then when we get into measure 8, we're going to change that picking pattern slightly. But first of all, we need to get into this D11 chord. So to get into this chord, what we'll do is we will keep the first finger on this time, and we'll move the second finger down one fret. So it's on the C string 6th, and then we will add the pinky onto the E string at the 8th. Third finger can come off there. Then the first finger, like I say, just stays on there. And then we're in that position. Really nice D11 chord there. And then we play that on beat 1, all 4 strings together. Beat 2 is the C string, as previously in previous measures. And then the next note is the E string, just like before. And then the next note is the A string. But then at this point now on beat 5, we don't work back down the strings. We do this little ascending melody line, which will take us into theme 2. So beat 5 is going to be this A string at the 7th. The third finger will take that, but we'll leave the rest of the chord on so it can be ringing over this note. So we put that onto the A string 7th, pick that on beat 5, and then on beat 6, we're going to add the pinky onto the A string 9th and pick that on beat 6 there. But again, leave these other fingers on for now as we pick those notes. So just that measure 8. Okay, then with measure 7, Brilliant. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. So onto the B section now, theme 2. This follows exactly the same chord progression that we've just learned. So the left hand isn't doing anything different. We're just going to add in some strumming to this section. So the right hand just has a little bit more to do. So if we look at measures 9 and 10, as I say, the chords are the same. So we're starting on this G chord. So measures 9 and 10 should sound like this. Okay, so measure 9, as I say, we start on this G chord and play all 4 strings together. For some reason, when we get into theme 2, because we're doing this strumming, I find that strumming that first chord on beat 1 just helps for some reason. I think when I play in theme 1, I tend to play that chord by picking the notes. But when we get to theme 2, I like to strum through it. Again, personal choice, whatever you prefer is absolutely fine. There's no right way or wrong way. I just think that seems to work better in theme 2. So beat 2 is just like it was in theme 1, where we play the C string, followed by the E string. But then when we get to beat 4, this is where we now switch to strumming, and we're playing the rhythm for the second half of the measure, 4, 5, and 6, which we just think of really as a down, down, up, down strum. Okay, so that kind of achieves that rhythm automatically by just thinking of it as a strum. So beat 4 is a down strum through that chord, and then bring the hand back up on like the and after beat 4. We won't play that, we won't do an up strum, but just bring the hand up to get the rhythm correct. And then on beat 5, we do a down strum again. But this time we do hit the strings on the up strum for the and after beat 5. So we do an up strum there between beats 5 and 6, and then finish with another down strum on beat 6. So that kind of 4, 5, and 6 is just down, down, up, down. 4, 5, and 6. Down, down, up, down. Okay, so if we put that with the first half of the measure, we would have. Okay, a bit slower. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, nice. So if we take that into measure 10, we're doing the same chord change. We're moving to this G augmented chord, so just the same as measure 2. And now the kind of right hand pattern for this measure is the same as that previous measure. So we start the same as measure 2 with a full chord hit, but we could strum that chord. And then C string on beat 2, E string on beat 3, and then this down, down, up, down strum that we just learnt in the previous measure. Okay, so that measure 10 once again. Nice, and then with measure 9. Okay, so just before we have a go at playing those two measures through together, I just want to draw your attention to that dynamic symbol there. We can see that as we're playing through measures 9 and 10, we have these crescendo lines, so we're building volume through these two measures. So when we start on the G chord at the start of measure 9, we're probably still playing mezzo piano there because that's what we were playing at the end of the theme 1. So we start off moderately soft. But then as we play through these two measures, just build the volume just by picking slightly harder and strumming slightly harder. It's very subtle. It's not a massive change. We're not like sort of like trying to break the strings by the end of measure 10. We're just gradually building the volume. Okay, so let's have a go at playing those measures 9 and 10 through together now. 4, 5, 6. On to measures 11 and 12, they should sound like this. Okay, Okay, so the chords are the same as in theme 1, so the same as measures 3 and 4. So we're on this G6 chord at the start of measure 11, so all we've done to get there is move that third finger up a fret like we did in the previous section. And then the right hand pattern, just the same as the previous 2 measures, so all 4 strings on beat 1, followed by the C string, then the E string, and then this down, down, up, down on this G6 chord. Okay, so all together. Brilliant. And you can see there under this measure, these crescendo lines are still increasing, so we're still kind of building volume into this measure until this final kind of down, down, up, down strum, where we're playing that forte or loud. Okay, so the previous 3 measures, 9, 10, into this measure 11, we've gone from moderately soft, gradually building volume until we're playing this final down, down, up, down, forte or loud. Okay, and then when we get into measure 12, this is then the same as measure 4. So we just go back to the picking, and we're done with strumming now for this section. So we move it to this G7 chord, so the pinky goes on just like before, and we play this identically to measure 4. So we play all 4 strings together, and then just pick up and down the strings, C, E, A, E, C. Okay, but when we hit this measure 12, we're going to bring that volume right down to playing mezzo piano once again, or moderately soft. So after that kind of forte strumming at the end of measure 11, we bring it right down quite suddenly in measure 12 to playing moderately soft once again. Okay, so those 2 measures through again, without the dynamics, just kind of showing you how to play them, we would have... Okay, brilliant. So let's have a go at playing those 2 measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. So measures 13 and 14 now are just identical to measures 5 and 6. So we're on the C chord at the start of measure 13. So just the same as measure 5, and then we move it to the C minor chord for measure 14. And that's just the same as measure 6. And then if we take it into measures 15 and 16, they should sound like this. Okay, so a little cheeky kind of 16th note there in measure 16, just to kind of lead into the C section, but we'll get to that in a second. If we look at measure 15 for now, this is just identical to measure 7 from the A section. So we're moving to this G chord, and we play it just like we did in measure 7, all 4 strings together, followed by that standard picking pattern. So when we go into measure 16, it starts the same way as measure 8 in that we turn it into this D11 chord. But then what we'll do when we hit these notes on beat 1, we want to cut them from ringing to achieve that staccato sound there at the start of measure 16. So the way I would do that is just kind of after you've hit that chord, just take the pressure off the chord, so lift the fingers off, keep them touching the strings so they're still muting them, but you've just taken the pressure off the frets, and then maybe as well use that third finger just to touch the G string, because that was an open string, so that'll just carry on ringing. If we just take the pressure off the chord, that G string will carry on. So as we lift the pressure off, just use that third finger to mute that string. An alternative way is using the left hand, so the right hand, to do that. So once you've hit the chord, just using that right hand to mute the strings down here. Okay, so whichever way is easier for you, just make sure that we cut those notes after we've hit that chord, and then let that ring for beat 2 and also beat 3, but then the and after beat 3 we have this cheeky little 16th note where we hit the A string at the 5th, and then straight after on beat 4 we hit it again. Okay, and then same notes as in the previous section, the A string 7th, third finger takes that, and then pinky onto the A string 9th, just like in measure 8. Okay, so very similar to measure 8, just rhythmically slightly different, and that little cheeky staccato on beat 1. Okay. Brill. So those two measures once again. Nice. So let's have a go at playing those two measures through together now. 4, 5, 6. On to the C section now, theme 3. We're playing the same chord progression once again here, so the left hand is the same as what we've been doing, but we're now going to move to this sort of entirely strumming pattern for the right hand. And it's a little bit more tricky than the previous sections. The rhythm for these measures is 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and. Now that sounds quite tricky, but what we'll do in a minute, we'll break that down as a strumming pattern rather than thinking of it as a kind of rhythm that will count, because at the speed we have to play this, that rhythm is too difficult to count. But once we translate that rhythm into a strumming pattern, it becomes a lot more straightforward. The only thing to sort of appreciate here is that we're playing a bit faster. If we think about the previous sections, we were playing mostly this 8th note rhythm, which is fairly steady. But when we get into this theme 3, this strumming pattern is more of a kind of 16th rhythm. So it's almost like sort of double speed to what we've been playing. So just kind of keep that in mind. The tempo is going to be a bit faster here, or sound a bit faster. The tempo is the same, but it's going to sound faster because we're playing this kind of 16th note rhythm largely rather than 8th note. So I say just keep that in mind. But now let's look at turning this rhythm just into a strumming pattern. So if we think about beat 1, that is going to be a down strum on this G chord, and then bring the hand up on the and after beat 1, but don't make contact with the strings. And then we do a down strum on beat 2, up strum on the and after beat 2, and then a down strum on beat 3, and then another up strum on the and after beat 3. Okay, so we'll just stop there for now, kind of halfway through this measure. So that first half of the measure, what we've basically done is a down, down, up, down, up. And that's our 1, 2 and 3 and. Okay, 1, 2 and 3 and. Or down, down, up, down, up. Okay, a little bit slower. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward if you think about it just as a strumming pattern. Down, down, up, down, up. That's okay, we're okay with that. So then if we take that into the second half of the measure, it's just the same pattern again. So on beat 4, we do our down strum, let that ring for a beat, and then do 5 and 6 and as down, up, down, up. Just like before. So down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. The only thing to notice here is that the up strum on the and after beat 3, that is a 16th note, so beat 4, that down strum on beat 4 comes in pretty quickly, so don't kind of like pause halfway through the measure. That down strum on beat 4 happens a 16th note after the previous up strum. So down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and. And it helps here as well, I think, to add that little accent, that slight emphasis on beat 1, but then again on beat 4. So down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. 1, 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and. A little bit slower. Okay, good. So that sounds a little bit different to the performance video because we're playing it slower there. When we play this kind of at tempo, it'll sound more like. Okay, so that's the kind of tempo or speed that we want. The other reason it sounds different is because we've ignored these chunk strums and muted strums, but we'll look at those now. So if we just base this on our strumming pattern, down, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up. Once we're happy with that, we then just need to bring in these chunk strums. So beat 3, down strum on beat 3 is a chunk strum. The down strum on beat 6 is also a chunk strum, but then the up strum after beat 6 at the end of the measure is like a muted up strum. Okay, but we don't hear the strings, just hear that muted sound. Okay, so if we look at the first half of the measure, 1, 2 and 3 and, or down, down, up, we move this now to a down, down, up, chunk up. Okay, so when you do the chunk on beat 3, just do that the standard way with the right hand. I tend to lift the pressure off the chord as well as I do the chunk strum, just to help it all kind of mute properly. But then if you do that, just make sure that you put the pressure back on for that up strum straight after beat 3. Okay, then if we take that into the second half of the measure, it's pretty much just the same again. Down, down, up, chunk up. The only difference here is that final up strum is a muted up strum. So whereas after beat 3, we put the pressure back onto the chord, so we heard that chord, when we do the and after beat 6, just leave the pressure off so that we get that muted sound. So the whole measure again, down, down, up, chunk, up, down, down, up, chunk, mute. Without me speaking. I mean, I caught the G string there when I did that, which is why you heard that. When we're playing this at the tempo that we need to, it probably doesn't matter if you catch that G string like that. Just generally speaking, it wants to be a kind of muted sound there at the end of the measure, but it doesn't really matter because, like I say, when we're playing at tempo, as long as the rhythm is correct, it's all good. So once again. Okay, so once you can do that, that's good, but we want to build that tempo slightly to make it a bit faster. So kind of at the correct tempo, that strumming pattern should sound more like this. So quite fast, but it's the same as doing it slow. Just got to build that speed. Okay, so once you're happy with that strumming pattern, then we're sorted for the rest of this section, really, for the most part, because it's just the same strumming pattern for each measure. It's the same chords as the previous two sections. So once we've played this G chord for measure 17, we then turn it into the G augmented chord and do that same strumming pattern again. Okay, so measure 17 and 18 together. Nice. So when we do our playthrough, we'll play that a little bit slower. So let's have a go at playing measure 17 and 18 through together now. 4, 5, 6. So measure 19 all the way through to the end of measure 23 is this same strumming pattern now, over familiar chords as well. So there's nothing really new to learn here, so we'll not go through the rest of this in too much detail. I'll just kind of play it through for you. So we're starting on this G6 chord at the start of measure 19, and then if I play measure 19, 20, 21, 22 and 23, it should sound like this. Okay, so then into measure 24, we now move to this D11 chord, as we've done in the previous sections. The first half of this measure is that same strumming pattern of down, down, up, chunk, up. Okay, but then into the second half of this measure, we just slow it down back to this eighth note rhythm. So we're not playing on the ands in between anymore. We just play on beat 4, a down strum of that D11. And then on beat 5, we add the third finger onto the A string 7th and do an up strum of that chord. Okay, and then for beat 6, we want to turn this into a kind of different version of the D11. So what we'll do is we'll move the third finger up 2 frets to the 9th, and then add the first finger onto the E string 8th, second finger onto the C string 9th. So a little bit like a kind of G7 chord down here, but up at the 9th fret. Then we do a down strum on beat 6 there. So the second half of that measure 24, just on the beat, we're playing. Okay, brill. So just that measure 24 on its own. A little bit slower. Okay, and then with measure 23, nice. So let's have a go at playing measures 23 and 24 through together now. 4, 5, 6. So after we've played measure 24, that D11 chord resolves to the G chord, and we go back to the start of measure 1, and then we play most of theme 1 through again, so up to the end of measure 7. So once we've played measure 24, at D11, all we'll do is we'll slide that second finger up 2 frets to the 11th, we'll take the third finger off, we'll leave that first finger kind of behind, because once we get there, that'll flatten down to complete that half bar across the E and the A, and then we're in that G chord position, ready for measure 1. Okay, so that last note there is the end of measure 7. Once we've played that, we then jump to measure 25 just to finish off this piece with this little coda. So what we'll do is we'll move to this D11 chord and we'll play all 4 strings on beat 1, just like we did in the previous sections. Then we pick the C string, then the E string, then the A string, just like we have previously. And then what we'll do this time is we are going to add our finger onto the A string 7th, but we'll use the pinky this time. We used the third finger when we did it in measures, in theme 1 and theme 2, but this time we're going to use the pinky. And that's important because when we pick that note on beat 5, we're going to slide this all the way up to the 14th fret. And you could just slide up and let the slide do the talking, but when I get there, I like to pick that note again on beat 6, just to give it that volume so you really hear it, okay? So slide up to it, so you get that slide sound, but then you can either leave it or pick it on beat 6. Either way, whatever you prefer. And then into measure 26, we then bring that pinky down to the 10th fret, and then add the other fingers to complete this G add 9 chord, so E string 7th and C string 9th. All 4 strings together with the open G. Beautiful chord there just to finish off that piece. So we play that on beat 1 and let that ring because that's the end of the piece. So those measures 25 and 26 once again. Okay, so as we play those 2 measures, we just slow things down into that final G add 9 chord just to finish it off nicely. Okay, so let's have a go at playing that measure 25 and 26 through together now. 4, 5, 6.
All right, guys, so this mini lesson was a ton of fun. We got to learn a chord progression that is quite a bit different from what we typically play, and one that I think is very, very beautiful sounding. So I hope you enjoyed learning this piece. Before we wrap up, I do want to give you a friendly reminder that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here. Or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for ML019. That was the lesson number for this lesson. Don't forget too that the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer is on that page, so you can literally hit play, watch that tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars to loop the sections, slow it down to any speed you want, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we will catch you in the next one. Take care.